Hey, I hope everyone's doing well this morning. We are up in New England, Massachusetts, New Hampshire area this morning, picking up a trailer. And spent the better part of the day yesterday driving through some pretty severe weather. We left out of Boston, Mass at about 9 or 10 a.m. and headed north up to southern New Hampshire. And this was supposed to be the nor'easter of the year, the heaviest storm of the season, because it's been a very light winter so far in the Northeast. And it was supposed to shut down all the airports, shut down the roads, cause massive blackouts and power outages, and basically shut down the entire Northeast. And it really wasn't that bad, but at the same time, it really depended where you were. Like I said, we left out of Boston maybe 9 or 10 a.m., headed up on 93, and it very quickly turned from rain, and it had been raining for about 12 hours at that point, and it turned into sort of heavy, wet, slushy snow. And at first, then it wasn't a big deal, because it just melted as soon as it hit the highway, and then as soon as you got towards the New Hampshire line, again heading north on 93, it started building up on the road, and it started coming down really, really hard. And you had a couple of cars start to, spin out. And you had a couple of 18-wheelers, for instance, start to lose traction on the uphill, because the highway here, it's just sort of gradually uphill and downhill. And on the even very gradual uphill sections, the 18-wheelers started losing traction, and they were kind of stuck in the slow lane and had to get themselves off the highway. And that's the kind of thing that happens a lot. You see it all the time in the Midwest. And even dudes in their jacked up F-150s or what have you started having trouble because they would get on the highway. And it happened in front of us. A guy got on the highway and he just started fishtailing immediately and almost lost it before he remembered how you're supposed to drive in snowy weather, and sort of corrected it. And then we got off the highway and started going down some of the side roads, and it got worse and worse, and it got to where I'm going to say there was about 6 to 8 inches on the ground, and it kept coming down. I mean, it didn't stop hardly all day. It went until after midnight, maybe 2 or 3 a.m. And so, because it was that wet, heavy snow, it started building up on the trees, and you started having branches come down, and then entire trees and started coming down, and then some of the roads started getting closed, and we had to start taking detours, and it got pretty challenging. And we eventually got where we were going, but there was no way we were getting out of there with a trailer hitched up, obviously. And then we spent the rest of the day driving in and around southern New Hampshire, northern Massachusetts, taking care of other business. And overall, the truck worked fantastic. We had not driven either one of our F-150s, the Power Boost or this one, which is the diesel, the 3.0 Power Stroke diesel, in heavy snow and in steep terrain. And this truck performed brilliantly. And so I want to just talk about it, because there were some things, a number of things we liked a lot about it, and then a number of things that could stand some improvement. And the first thing, if you haven't driven one of these things in snow or heavy weather, it's an absolutely spectacular truck. Specifically, the powertrain and the traction, they are perfectly calibrated, and you do not have the kind of trouble that you do with other vehicles. The empty pickup trucks, we didn't have any load in the back. Traditionally, empty pickup trucks have a real bad reputation for getting squirrely and doing a ton of fishtailing in slippery weather, and this one did not. Again, we did have to turn on four-wheel drive, and with this particular model, the XLT, it didn't have auto four-wheel drive, so we had to manually engage it after we got to a certain point on the highway and we could start to feel it losing traction. And so obviously you need to use four-wheel drive when you're in any substantial amount of snow. But the traction control, either we didn't need to use it or it was very, very unobtrusive. And we didn't have that thing you get with traction control sometimes where it starts, turning the brakes on and kind of pulsing the brakes in order to keep the wheels from spinning too much. And Toyotas, for example, are terrible in this regard. I mean, they absolutely kill the momentum of the vehicle. And in a lot of them, you can't turn the traction control off. So the vehicle will actually come to a stop going uphill because the traction control just will not stop grabbing and cycling and pulsing on the calipers, and it'll kill your momentum. And in this truck here, the F-150, we didn't have any of those terrain modes or any of that BS engaged. We just had it in normal mode. Actually, not normal mode, tow haul mode, for a reason I'll explain in a minute. And plain old two-wheel drive. And then when we started losing enough traction in two-wheel drive, we put it in four-wheel drive. And with, the mode dial here, you can turn the dial and you go from tow haul and eco and sport, and then you start going into all your different rough terrain modes. Slippery, which turns on four-wheel drive, and deep snow and sand, and mud and ruts and all that stuff. And we didn't have any of those modes engaged because as far as I'm concerned, those modes are a waste of your time. For the most part. And in regular, plain old 4-high, and in tow haul mode, which is not a terrain mode, it's actually just a powertrain calibration mode. The truck worked great. The truck worked spectacularly. And again, there was no lightness in the rear end, no tendency to fishtail, there was no tendency to understeer or push to the outside of turns. And you get that sometimes when you've got the transfer case locked. It just went exactly where you point it, up or down hills, and went as fast or as slow as you needed it to, with zero drama. And so the traction, again, in this truck is phenomenal. It's got a rear locker, and we had no need to lock the rear differential. We've got Michelins. They're the factory Michelins that came with it. And I think they're all-terrains. I'm pretty sure they are because I've seen that pattern advertised as an all-terrain. And the Michelins, the factory Michelins, work great. In our other truck, the Power Boost, it had factory hand cooks. And we didn't like those tires at all. They were advertised as an all-terrain tire, and they're definitely not an all-terrain tire. They lasted 50,000 miles, but they weren't half as good of a tire as these Michelins are, either in wet weather or in snowy weather. We replaced the hand cooks on the Power Boost with Michigan XLTs, and I think the XLT is a specific model that you can only get at Costco, maybe. And it's got real wide channels, so it can evacuate a ton of water or snow. The lugs aren't that deep when you look at the side cut, but the channels themselves, as you look at the tire like lengthwise, between the lugs are very wide, so they give you a ton of room to clear water and snow and slush out from the tires. And so either the XLTs that you can get like aftermarket from a place like Costco, or the factory Michelins, are just absolutely spectacular tires. And so it's not clear what made the traction so good, whether it was the powertrain calibration, whether it was the the weight distribution, and whether it was maybe the tires, but it just worked brilliantly in deep snow and going up and down very, very steep hills off the interstate with tons of snow on the ground. And by the way, so on the subject of the mode, we don't keep it in normal mode anymore. And the reason why, if you look at the gear shifting, it goes from first to second to third, and then to fourth, obviously. And that's the way it's supposed to shift. But if you have it in normal mode, it tends to skip second gear, and it tends to spend a lot of time in third gear. And we've mentioned it before, but it gives you that feeling when you watch the tack needle, like it's a 16-year-old who's never driven a manual transmission before, and they're sort of slipping the clutch and letting it out real slowly, and it's just sort of cringeworthy. And it gives you the feeling that, I don't know if it's the lockup clutch and the torque converter, or what the hell it is, but it's just so, like, cringeworthy. The fact that it shifts straight from first to third gear, and then you just kind of hear it and feel that feeling of a clutch being let out very slowly, like you're trying to melt the clutch, or like it's a 16-year-old who's never driven a manual transmission before. It's not a good feeling, and it happens both in the Power Boost and in the in this one here, the diesel. And so in order to stop that, we've started to use tow haul mode, and that makes the shifts a little bit quicker, and that skips that, it disables that feature where it skips second gear. So you're not spending a ton of time in third with that weird clutch slipping thing happening. All right, number 2, the second out of 5 really, really great things about this truck in deep snow and heavy weather. The braking. Again, the braking was great. No drama. No lockup. And when the brakes did lock, as I'm sure they did every now and then, you didn't feel a lot of pulsing. You didn't feel a lot of grabbing. There weren't any cases where we felt like there was going to be a loss of stability. And what can I say? The brakes just worked great. Number 3, overall stability and handling. It was just great. Again, even with no weight in the truck bed, you never got that feeling like it was loose, like it was about to start fishtailing and try to come around on you, or try to take you off the road and send you down a ravine or something. Number 4, the HVAC. It's great. And as we mentioned the other day, it's actually got real knobs and real buttons. So it's very easy to adjust the temperature. Very easy to adjust the overall setting if you want to leave it in auto, if you want to go to max defrost, as we had to once or twice. Unlike the new vertical portrait mode screen in the Lightning and a couple of other the electric models, which I think we said is 17 inches the other day, and it might actually only be 15.5 inches. If you get the truck with the 12-inch screen, which is really a better screen, you still get the physical knobs, so you can actually adjust your HVAC while you're driving. If you get the truck with the bigger screen, which is the portrait mode screen, that might actually be 15.5 and not 17 inches. You lose the knobs, and you got to fiddle with the screen and mess around with the screen to just adjust your temperature or adjust your heated seats. And again, that's ridiculous. It's like Ford took a step back in time and forgot all the lessons they learned with the Sync 2 system, like maybe 10 years ago, which was a terrible, like a disaster of a system. And so it's like Sync 4 with the 12-inch landscape mode screen is the one you want. Sync 4 with the 15.5-inch portrait mode screen is the one you want to avoid at all costs. Because the HVAC in this truck, again, it's great. Most of the time, you just set it and forget it. If you ever need to adjust it, though, it's very easy to adjust. And in a full day of driving around in heavy snow on slick roads, with lots and lots of stuff coming down on the car, we never once had the feeling that, damn it, turn the temperature up. Damn it, turn the fan up a little bit. Damn it, turn the fan down a little bit. Switch from auto to defrost. Switch from defrost to, floor mode. We did have to put the defrost on a couple times after we'd had it parked, just to clear, just to get the fog out of the windshield. But what can I say? The HVAC just worked. It is. Well, there was one issue that we'll talk about with respect to the wipers, as far as an improvement that we wish they would make in terms of the heating and the defrosting. But for the most part, the HVAC in this car, in this truck, works great, and you just never have to think about it. And then number 5, out of the things we love about this truck in heavy winter weather, the fact that it's got that aluminum body, which is never going to rust, unlike every other vehicle we've owned up to this point, except I guess the Tesla, the Model S Tesla, also has an aluminum body. But you don't want to take the Tesla through deep snow because it'll tear off the front bumper because of how little ground clearance it has. And so for a vehicle you're actually going to use in heavy winter weather, you need a Ford pickup with an aluminum body. And it's shocking that the Chevy / GMC and the Ram still come with a steel body. How many years now? 6 years after Ford first came out with the 2015? So yeah, we're 8 years now after Ford came out with the first aluminum bodied F-150, and then 6 years now after Ford came out with the first aluminum bodied Super Duty. And still, all these years later, if you buy a GM or you buy a Ram, you're going to get a truck that's going to start to rust on you after a couple of years of driving through snow and slush because of all that salt they put on the roads. And you can almost like feel and hear your truck's body disintegrating and see those little rust bubbles start to come through in the wheel wells and the rockers and so on and so forth. And it's just like, why would they, knowing that those companies are based in Michigan, where it snows all the damn time for 7 or 8 months out of the year, the fact that GM and Ram are making you buy a pickup truck that still has a steel body 8 years after Ford came out with the aluminum body F-150 is astonishing. And that by itself almost makes a decision for you as far as which vehicle you're going to buy. Like, are you going to buy the Ford, or are you going to buy a vehicle that's going to rust out on you and disintegrate in front of your very eyes over the course of a half a decade or a decade before you're even done making payments on it? Because guess what? These days you're making payments for 6, 7, 8 years. Supposedly, somebody has said there are now 100-month car loans being written on these crazy expensive new cars and trucks that everyone's buying. And so do you really want your vehicle to rust out on you before you're even done making payments on it? That's kind of sad. So thanks, Ford, for making a truck that is not going to have that happen. The one sort of asterisk or caveat to that is knowing that the aluminum body is such a soft material and very, very easy to dent. It stretches, it tears much easier than steel. It's awfully frustrating that they didn't put any kind of bump strip on it. As we've discussed once or twice in the past, we actually had a teeny bopper. We were dropping the kids off for school the other day, and some 16-year-old first-time driver pulled up and actually hit the side door with her minivan, or probably her parents' minivan. And if she'd have been a quarter inch further to the right, she would have caused thousands of dollars of damage to the driver's door and to the driver's side rear door. And it just so happened that she just sort of barely hit it and scuffed it. And we took it to the dealer, and they were able to buff it out, and there's no damage to the paint, no dent, and it was a very close call. And the problem is, well, you could say, So what? It's the other person's fault. Their insurance is paying for it. But you are out of a vehicle for weeks and weeks and weeks as a result of their stupidity. And so it would be nice if Ford actually put something like a bump strip on the side, or if they put cladding on the side, like they did back in the day. We have a Expedition from 2004. It's the Eddie Bauer, and like the bottom half of the door, like the bottom 6 or 8 inches of the door, have like two-tone plastic cladding on them. And maybe that's got out of fashion, but like the price you pay is that you have a vehicle that is very, very, very easy to damage, and that will cost whoever hits it many, many thousands of dollars and ruin their insurance premiums. And at the same time, leave you with a vehicle that has to go to the body shop for a couple weeks or a month or two to get fixed, depending on how badly somebody's hit it. So maybe you're not out any money, but you're out of the use of your vehicle for a huge amount of time. Anyway, that was meant to be a thing we like about the vehicle, the fact that it's got an aluminum body. Okay, the 5 things we don't like about driving this vehicle in snow and heavy weather. And number 1 is kind of astonishing. It's the fact that the cruise control stops working altogether once you get enough snow and slush sprayed up onto your bumper, because there are like radars and lidars and sensors built into the bumper, built into the very top of the windshield, that operate the active or adaptive cruise control. And when those sensors get blocked by enough snow and slush and sort of gunk, the adaptive cruise control doesn't work. But Ford has somehow set it up so when the adaptive cruise control doesn't work, then cruise control in general doesn't work. You can't even use like regular, like dumb cruise control. And you might say, well, you shouldn't be using cruise control when it's snowing out. Okay. Well, what if you're on a section of road that is clear and maybe it's just wet? And it's not snowy and slushy. Maybe it's just sort of rainy and wet. Because it might be snowing, but the roads actually might be in pretty good shape. And the fact that the sensor to the cruise control, to the adaptive cruise control, when that sensor gets blocked, the entire cruise control system is shut down. That's kind of a big time miss on the part of Ford. And if you know of a way to restore the functions of the cruise control without the use of that sensor, that would be good to know, because we fiddled around with the controls for a while yesterday and there was no getting it to work. So maybe somebody knows how to do that and maybe they don't. Number 2. Okay, the windshield wipers do a pretty good job, and you can't see it now, but when there's heavy snow coming down, it starts to build up underneath the wipers to the point where they can't like fully get to the down position, and it builds up little by little by little until they're like 6 inches above the place they're supposed to wind up when they're fully down. And that wouldn't be a problem if the bottom edge of the windshield was heated. We didn't have the wipers themselves get iced up, which happens a lot because it wasn't that cold actually yesterday. It never actually dropped below freezing. And so you didn't have like ice building up on the wipers, although that does happen at other times. But you did have a ton of really heavy snow building up underneath where the wipers are, like when the wipers would push it down. And maybe every 10 minutes or so we had to get out and clear that out. And then again, as stated, occasionally in the snow you have the wipers start to get iced up when the air temp is below freezing, as it was not yesterday. And there's a way to avoid that, and the way to avoid that is by either having, the easiest way is to have some type of an electrically heated bottom edge of your windshield. And some vehicles have that, and this one, for some reason, doesn't, even in a $60,000 pickup truck. And so that was frustrating. I remember way back in the 80s, Ford came out with something called the InstaClear windshield, which was a windshield with a defroster built into it. And it was very, very, very thin metal wires that you couldn't even see. They were super, super thin. And it actually worked as advertised. And that was in the 80s, like 30 plus years ago, almost 40 years ago. And I think the Ford Taurus, the original Ford Taurus, which came out in 86 maybe. And then Ford stopped making them. And I think they make a different, I think they make a similar type of windshield now for the European market. Can't remember the name of it, but they stopped making it in the US. And it's just astonishing that you can't get a windshield with a built-in defroster like the way your rear window has a built-in defroster. And the fact that you've got wipers building up, with ice and snow around them and below them, and forcing you to get out and like clear them every 10 or 15 minutes, which isn't the easiest thing to do when you're on the highway. That's kind of frustrating. And you would have thought Ford would be, that would not still be a problem in the year 2023. All right, number 3, as we've discussed before, the XLT model does not have automatic 4-wheel drive, and you've got to get you've got to get a Lariat or above to get automatic 4-wheel drive. And the fact is, like, you don't want to have to be manually engaging and disengaging 4-wheel drive over and over again, depending on the circumstances. When you go from a dry road to a road covered in snow, when you go from a road covered in snow to a wet road. And for the most part, on a wet road, you don't need 4-wheel drive. Only on a really, really slippery, snowy, icy road. And so again, like the mid-range model, and the XLT is a mid-range model, it's just annoying that you still have to manually engage and disengage 4-wheel drive. The fourth, as we've discussed in the past, downhill traction, specifically engine braking, is practically non-existent in the diesel engine, and it's somewhat lacking in the gas engine. Some people have said no, we get all the engine braking we need in the gas engine, but we have not observed that in the Power Boost. The Power Boost a lot of times tries to shut the engine off when you're going downhill, and so you're basically coasting, and until you put it into tow haul mode, which very few people know that tow haul mode disables that. And then the final thing we'll mention is the mirrors. Supposedly, the flat section of the mirror has a defrost built into it. It didn't seem to work that well yesterday. Obviously, the bubble mirrors don't if you get bubble mirrors. And then the curved section of the mirror did not appear to have defrost built into it. The rear cameras kind of got gunked up, and the lights. If you have LED lights, they will get snow and ice and stuff built up on them, and eventually you'll start to lose your lighting because the LEDs don't put out any heat, so they can't melt the snow that's trying to build up on them. Regular incandescent lights can build up heat, but LEDs cannot, and so they're going to get iced up, and you're going to have to somehow start clearing off the your headlights after you drive long enough through bad weather.
And so anyway, those are the 5 things we love about this truck. 5 things could stand a little bit of improvement on this truck.
Or on the F-150 in general. If you do a lot of driving in snowy, icy weather. Overall, it's a fantastic truck. It's so much better than so many other vehicles. We'd say it's a 9 out of 10, maybe 8.5 out of 10. And if they made a few improvements, some of which are very minor, this would be just about the perfect vehicle for driving in miserable weather. All right, thanks everyone. Hope you have a great day.